Well, I guess let's go ahead and get started. I see some people are still joining, but we will we're so lucky to have Jeff here, who we had a Fire Network retreat in November up at Blodgett, and we were up late talking about retirement and Jeff's passion for it. I personally am very inept at such things, so I always go to Jeff for advice. And I love, if you know Jeff, which I know, I think all of you do, he doesn't hold back on his opinions on things. And I really appreciate that in the retirement planning setting, because he's like, you're an idiot. I can't believe you haven't put any money in your Roth yet this year. And I'm like, what is that? So anyway, we had this idea that maybe we'd bring him in to help us all think through some of these issues. And he nerds out really deeply on this. And so, yeah, we did want to do a little disclaimer. Jeff is not like some kind of certified financial advisor, and we're not sure really what the legal parameters are around him sharing some of his thoughts. But this is really just for fun and to plant some seeds with you all and to share what he's learned through his process with this. So with that, Jeff, you can take it over, and can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Oh yeah. So thanks for joining, folks. And this is a small enough crew that if at any time you have a question, just feel free to stop me in the middle of the talk, because it's not gonna bother me at all. But any rate, so like Lania said, this talk's probably fairly relevant. I'll just say to most people that are in nonprofits or in any school system. The University of California is kind of in a special place because we're both a nonprofit and a public school. So we get to play in two different arenas that afford us some tax benefits that other groups don't have. So it's definitely not a talk for kind of your standard private employer, but for anyone in the public world or nonprofit sector, this probably has something useful, maybe. But at any rate, like Lania said, the biggest thing is I'm not a financial advisor. I was just raised by two people that are wickedly smart Berkeley grads that never prioritized financial planning and are still working in their 70s. So it's something that through my folks' failure, I have become very passionate about. So it's something that I really do nerd out on. I sit at home on the couch and look at things all night. So for real expert advice though, it took me about 5 to 8 years, I guess, to find somebody within the UC system that knew more than I did. I'm sure there's more people out there, but it took me a lot of effort to try to find someone that could give me advice. And I finally was successful at locating this person maybe 3 years ago. And her name is Kimberly Becker, and she works for Fidelity, but she's a University of California expert for Fidelity. So she understands our system and Fidelity and is wickedly intelligent and knows way more than I do. So she is a very excellent resource, and I encourage anyone to reach out to Kim. She's a great person. So at any rate, what I'm actually going to talk about in this presentation is kind of like, what is retirement planning? Really, what is your exit strategy? How are you going to get out of here? Like Josh was saying a few minutes ago. And there's three real take home messages, and that's like, when, how much money do you need, and how do you get there the cheapest? And what I mean the cheapest is, how do you pay Uncle Sam the least? Because it's all about trying to pay the least amount of taxes as possible in the world of retirement. So then I'll go into a little bit of stuff about a little UC centric, like where do you go to click on the box to change your retirement allocations and those sort of things. And then I'll look at some tools that are useful to try to piece together the different, little chunks of money that you may or may not have floating around from different past jobs or, or a spouse or what have you. And then the last thing I'll touch on in the most brevity is this: where do you put your money so that way the tax man doesn't take it all from you when you're in retirement. So that's where working with somebody like Kimberly is really useful. I will say that the big, don't talk to just one person. Like, do your own homework, and don't take an expert's advice as the only expert advice. Like I did 8 years ago and made some financial mistakes. So the other thing I'll point out is, like, as you look through the calculators, a lot of times when I talk to people on the phone or, you know, in person, and I'm talking about like, you know, return on investments, and I say, you know, I usually run my numbers at 12%, 10 to 12%, and people are like, oh wow, I've never had that. Well, the actual last 50-year average is 10%, 10.2%. So those are real numbers. And if you're investing in an average set of stocks in the stock market, you should receive about 10%. If you're too heavily into bonds, you may get down to 6.6, you know, but somewhere between that 7 to 11% is really kind of what the last 50 years has shown us. Not that that's going to happen in the future, but I just wanted to point that out because it's kind of an elephant in the room that I have with people all the time when I talk about retirement things. So when do you start investing? Well, it's like one of those things that they should really teach us in 8th grade curriculum. Like, you should start investing as soon as you get your first job, because that's when you can start putting into a retirement account. But none of us do, because it's not part of our culture. At least not anyone I know at the age of 18 does. But and then the other thing I'll kind of put out there is, we as university employees get this call every fall to kind of look at our, you know, open enrollment and look at our retirement and our, you know, our healthcare and all these other things. And it's a really good time of year, at least for me, to just get a reminder that's like, hey, go log into all of your stuff. See how much money you have or you don't have. Did you finish paying off a car? Can you put a little bit more into retirement? Did you just buy a car and you need to take a little out of retirement in terms of your percentages? But do it at least every year. I do it every week because, like I said, I'm a whack job about this. But do it and then play with the numbers a little bit, and I'll show you some cool tools to do that. And then the rules change every year in terms of how much money you can put in, what the tax benefits are. They'll give you more tax benefits and take them away as the IRS changes rules and leadership at the federal level. So check in with, you know, with a retirement expert at least every other year, just to stay, you know, kind of on top of what the latest and greatest changes are. So getting back to this planning, right? Like, okay, I need to plan. That's great. Plan for what? And okay, yeah, I need some money in retirement. Well, how much money do you need in retirement? Like, those are like really hard answers to get to. And one of the cool tools that we have is the UC ANR gives us a total compensation calculator, and as do all other campuses for that matter. But you can go in there, you get to basically plug in all of your health benefits that you've chosen. You get to plug in when you were hired, because that makes a huge difference in our system, a huge difference in terms of what your actual benefits are. And then it cranks out this number based on your salary that says this is what your total value, or, you know, what your total cost is to the University of California. And that's really important, because if you are happy with your consistent, like, living status in your consistent amount in your amount of income that you have today, then that gives you an idea of what it actually costs to be at that level that you are today, that level of comfort. If you want more money, it gives you an idea that, okay, I want more than that, or I want less than that. It just gives you a good starting point, because it's in today's dollars, and it actually shows you that, hey, the university, if you know, make $75,000, the university is actually kicking out you know, 108,000 to keep you around. So the other piece to know, so like, okay, so it's important to know where you are today, and then it's important to know what your future costs are going to be. So if you're hired, for example, before July 1st, 2013, you have a much, much lower cost in retirement in terms of healthcare than someone that's hired after that date. The rest of us that were hired after that date, you can watch these excellent resources that were just put out, I think, a year and a half ago, maybe, or a year ago. by the HR department, and they are excellent resources. And I encourage all people hiring any new positions to not provide input on what the healthcare benefits are. We hand people these huge stacks of paper and then typically give, say, oh yeah, it's great, but it's very inconsistent based on date of hire. And these videos are the cleanest resource I've found so far at explaining those. And then also how Medicare and health insurance interacts into the future. So these are important to know what your, to get an idea of what your medical costs are going to be in the future, because you need to subtract that from, add it to your other costs and subtract it from your potential income, right? So then you get to this point where you log into Fidelity and you say, this is how much money I want to have per year when I retire. And it kicks out this, this graph that says, okay, you may need this much, and you're gonna have a gap of this much. So you need to retire, more aggressively, for example, in, this is my personal scenario, right? So the tricky piece of this, the simple calculator that Fidelity has, is it only uses Fidelity's data. So it's not going to include any of your spouse's money or money that's in your health savings account or a past job where it was in Charles Schwab or who knows where, right? So that's important to know, and I'll touch base on how we can change get some of those inputs later into the plan. But first, you have to kind of go collect all those data, right? So there is a tool that we're going to get to later, but now we have to go find all these pieces. So the first piece that's logical and hopefully still exists into the future, is the Social Security, as to, Social Security being paid out that we paid in. How much is going to get paid out in the future, we don't know, but all we can do at this point is kind of go off of what the current estimates are that are provided to us. So you can jump into these things, and it's amazingly simple, actually. You plug in your most simple basic information and it kicks out a number that says if you retire at 67, you get this, at 70, you get this, and at 62, you get this, right? So actually really cool. And then you can take that information and plug it back into a calculator later. But for now, you just write that information down on a sheet of paper. The other piece is, we know that we get a pension from UC ANR. It's a little complicated on how much that pension is going to be, and it kind of like the Social Security and all other things retirement, it varies wildly based on age of when you're going to retire. So the most simple formula is that it combines the highest 3 consecutive years of pay with the years of service that you provided to the university and your age. This particular pension that we're part of, as you can see on the bottom, like I've done a bunch of different scenarios for myself at different retirement dates and separation dates, and you can basically say that, okay, I'm going to retire at 70, but I'm going to leave the University of California at the age of 50 or whatever it is. There's many scenarios that you can play with. And this calculator does a pretty good job of giving you, again, another number to fill in your pieces. So if you have money saved somewhere else that can get you from the age of 59 and a half, like a Roth IRA, can get you from 59 and a half to 67 or whatever it is, or 65, then you can max out your pension and then pull from your pension after that. So that's just an example of like how I kind of think of these things. So that is in UC Raise. You log in and you can access your UC pension calculator. The other one that some people are going to have access to and some are not, based on what healthcare plan you choose, is the health savings plan. I just want to point this one out. It's one of my all-time favorite retirement choices personally. And the reason is because the money goes in tax exempt and it comes out tax exempt. It's the only money you'll make in your life that isn't taxed. So that's pretty special in itself. And then you can go in and play with the health savings account estimator and like say, you're just starting a health savings account today and you have zero money in your health savings account, but you want to max it out at, well, now it's $8,000 a year, or $8,300 a year, sorry, for a couple. But the calculator wouldn't let me put 83 because we're still in the year 2023, not 2024. So the highest I could do was 7,300. But at any rate, you can see the math here, where if you're, getting sick a few times a year and it's costing you $3,000 a year in healthcare, and you leave it in there for 30 years, you're gonna have close to $500,000 and total tax savings of, $250,000. So a pretty excellent way to bridge potentially that gap again. If you're hired after 2013 and you need to make it to Medicare to get your healthcare covered, potentially this is a mechanism by which you can you can retire before the age of 65 and get like a low cost, high deductible health plan and limp your way to the finish line of 65 with Medi-Cal or Medicare, with this $500,000. So just another kind of interesting piece. So you go find all those pieces wherever they are. And again, don't forget old jobs and other things. And then you plug it into Fidelity's comprehensive retirement calculator, which really just makes everything fall into one basket where you can see it. So you can add personal information. So you can see here on the right, you can see, Jeffrey's end of plan, which is when I'm planning on dying at the age of 90. And then you can see my wife Emily's end of plan, where she's not really planning on it, but I have her passing away at the end of 90, or at the age of 90, because she's 4 years younger than me. And then you can see this big spike towards the end of my life that drops right at the end. And that is because dementia runs very, very rampant in my family. And I'm fully expecting that at the end of my life, I will be put into some sort of a care facility, and that those facilities run to the tune of $200,000 to $300,000 a year. So you see this huge spike in costs at the end of my life because I'm planning on having large health expenses at the end of my life due to, family reasons. So this is a really, really useful calculator. And you can see kind of the yellow is where the retirement comes in. And it bumps up when you get to Social Security age, and then it bumps up again when my wife gets to Social Security age. So the calculator kind of does it all and keeps track of it for you. And then it tells you how much you need to increase your investments to get to those goals that you've outlined for yourself. So very, very useful. Another one that fills in the gap that calculator doesn't. So let me go back real quickly. So this calculator really only has the brain capacity to handle one retirement age. So let me explain that a little bit. So this calculator, so for example, say the University of California is my career, and I am going to, again, Jeff Stackhouse, I'm going to work for the University of California until the age of 55. And then from the age of 55 to 65, I have a dream of being a cowboy like Josh Davey, or a commercial fisherman, or I'm going to go work seasonally and drive a log truck. I don't know what it is, but whatever it is that you have a dream for your second job, this is where you can kind of play with that, where you can have, your compound interest can get you to the age of 50. Then you write that number down. And then you add that to a different compounding interest to the age of 65, and then you write that number down. And then you can combine those into retirement at the age of 65 and get a real number. So it allows you to kind of break apart your different dreams of whether you're gonna win the lotto or whatever it is that you're gonna do that's great and different other than working until the age of 65. But not that there's anything wrong with working at the age of 65 financially. It makes the most sense. It's just whether or not, that's part of your life aspirations. So this is a really fun tool. It's very, very addictive for me and the people that I know that are passionate about this. And it also really is helpful for things like making a decision of, do we buy a car this year or do we wait a year? Because if you can put just a little more money into those compound interest calculators, it is scary how much money you can make with a little bit of money. Like in this example I have on here, you know, current principal of 50,000, whatever, plus, you know, whatever that is, it doesn't matter. But say you just do the annual addition of maximizing your Roth IRA, which I'll get to next, but that's $7,000 a year, and you can do that for 30 years. Like all of a sudden in retirement, just with that, that's it. Basically the price of a car and then maxing out $7,000 a year. Now you can retire with $116,000 a year for the rest of your life. Like it's incredible. It really is. It's fascinating to me when I start to play with these numbers. So then how do you, okay, so great. You've got these numbers, you've got these cool little calculators. How do you actually, like, where do you click the box to change the numbers, right? So the place to do that is called My Benefits, and the link is there, and I'm happy anybody that wants all these links, I can easily share them. But at any rate, you click on, click into your Fidelity account through the University of California, UC Rays, or you can get to it through Fidelity, it doesn't matter. There's multiple ways to get there. But then you go to contributions, and you can change your manage or change your contribution amount, and you can do it based on percentage, which is, what most people elect to do, but you need to be a little careful because depending on how much money you make, you could get over the max. And I can talk about the maxes, or you can do it based on dollar amounts, which is what I do just because I want to max out my, the options that I choose. So how do you know what there is to even what your options are, and how do you prioritize it? This is where talking to a financial advisor is really useful. But essentially, how Jeff Stackhouse prioritizes it, again, is I really like the Roth IRA because for a retirement option, you get taxed as you put that money in, but the money, once it's in there, is now tax-free. So all of the money that goes in gets taxed, but then all of the gains that money makes are tax-free. So, right, so like on the example on the right, if I put whatever, when I was hired in 2013, if I put $50 in there, that $50 would now be worth $150, if it was in the 500 index, and that $100 would be tax-free. So I think it's a great option, and it's a good first step. The other one that I mentioned that makes a lot of sense for me personally, because of my family health reasons, is the health savings account. I think anyone that has the option of doing a health savings account makes a lot of sense. It's not just like health expenses, but at the end of your life, it's little things like you can have, people come in and help clean your house and help take care of you at the end of life when your body doesn't want to do some of those things. The other one that's really popular that I know less about is the 529, which is an education fund, where those funds are also taxed going in, but the gains are tax-free as long as they're used for educational expenses. I've done a lot of reading about these the last few days, and they're actually pretty stinking complicated about what you can and cannot do. And I'll touch on some of the real minor basics, but I'm not qualified to talk about this one. It's not one that I've dedicated a decade to. I've only dedicated like 10 hours to it. So take whatever I say there with an extreme grain of salt. And then the two that we are allowed to kind of play with a little bit are the 457 and the 403Bs. And then we also have the option of doing a DCP, a 401k. And if you're making a lot of money, it's important to note that the 401a is an option if you're making over $146,000 a year. And we can talk about that. But basically what the 401a is not a good, it's like not a good tax advantage, because your money gets taxed on the way in and on the way out. But what it does is it can get your total income level down to where you can still invest into the other retirement accounts. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. And then the last one that I would throw out there is that just money market accounts. So not actually retirement accounts, but just investment funds are also a very good option. Those are taxed. You get taxed on those monies as they go in, and you get taxed on the gains as they come out. But you can take them out anytime you want. You want to buy a car, take it out. You want to go grocery shopping, take it out. Like, it doesn't matter. There's no strings attached and no penalties on those monies. So I usually encourage people to at least put some proportion of savings into, a money market account as well. So getting back to the 403B and 457, the 457 is for governments or nonprofits. The 403B is for schools. So like I said, this is where University of California employees get to kind of have both hands in the cookie jar. And essentially, I'll talk about the 403B first, because it's where I feel as though I was provided some relatively poor advice when I first started with UC by a financial expert from Fidelity. And that is an interesting account because you're allowed to take it's like a home equity line of credit. You can take a loan out against your own retirement and then pay your retirement back. So like, say for example, I have $80,000 in my 403B. I can take a loan of $40,000 out of that, 50% of that, or up to 50,000. So I can take a $40,000 loan against my retirement, and then I have to pay back my retirement instead of paying a financial institution, right? So it's beneficial because you have a very high, like, you're gonna get approved. Like, so having to go through the loan process and not potentially get approved is not a problem. You have 5 years to pay yourself back, and it's prime +1. So I don't really understand the prime interest rate, but it's changes, and it's set by the Fed somehow. But at any rate, so the prime right now is 8.5, so you'd be giving yourself 9.5%. But when you actually get into it and you start looking at it, which I did for the first time last year when one of my colleagues was doing a home remodel, she asked me to spend some time looking at it, and I was more than happy to do so. But basically, the money that you take out that's loaned to you is taxed as income. Because it's coming out of your paycheck. So it's hitting your paycheck, so it's getting taxed. And then the money coming back out of the 403B while in retirement is also taxed. So you're putting money back in there that's been taxed. And then the money, when it comes back out, its gains are also taxed. So you're essentially getting taxed twice on those dollars if you take them out and pay yourself back. So it doesn't really make sense to me why you would do that, and I may be missing something, but if it may make sense for some folks. For me, I put money in there, I didn't pay attention to it, I let the sum get over $100,000, and at that point it has no value, like no additional tax value, I should say, because you can only take a loan up to $50,000 against those funds. So if you're going to go the 403B route, yeah, Yana?
Well, you can finish your thought, and then I got a question here.
Oh, I was just gonna say, if you're gonna go the 403B route, I think it probably makes the most sense to get those funds up to $100,000 and then start putting them somewhere else. Because you can start taking those funds out at the age of 59.5. And if you take them out early, it's a 10% tax fee to the federales and a 2.5% tax fee to the state of California. So if you want those funds earlier than the age of 60, it costs you 12.5%.
So that's my question. So in both cases, if you want to go after your either 457 or 403B money before 60, you pay 12.5% penalty?
Yeah, they both have the same penalties, but the 457 has this interesting little thing where you only have to pay that penalty if you still work for the nonprofit. So if you walk away from UC and go be a cowboy, and you've got a ton of money in that account, you can pull it penalty free after you leave the University of California.
Oh, that's the difference. So you can early retire with your 457 money, but not your 403. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then I think at the end of the day, getting back to the loan scenario, you're really better off doing a HELOC on your house or finding a loan somewhere else, potentially, than you are taking it out of there. Because by the time you add the penalties on top of, or the taxes on top of, like money going in and money coming out, it ends up being a pretty hefty fee to get money that way. But it may be your only option, in which case it's a great thing to have. So at any rate, and then this is the 529, which I again don't have much business talking about, but I wanted to just touch on it because I spent a good portion of yesterday and today reading about it. And really, it seems to me like pre-2019, it wasn't a very good investment. And now after 2022, it seems okay. And the reason being is before 2019, it was only usable for like 4-year universities, essentially. So you had to have a pretty good idea or hope that you or your offspring or someone in your family was going to go to a 4-year university. And then in 2022, it got they sweetened the pot quite a bit, because up to $35,000 of that 529 can now go directly into a Roth IRA in the annual 7% increments. But over 5 years, you can max out someone's Roth IRA if the investment is over 15 years old for that beneficiary. And this is where it's like still like, I have a couple questions out to Kim, but she didn't get back to me before today's talk. But the way I read it and interpret it, which could definitely be incorrect, but the way I'm interpreting it today is that beneficiary has to be listed for 15 years before that individual can get the Roth funds. So it makes sense, right? If there's $35,000 in one of those accounts, that 35 could go, but you would not be. It doesn't seem as though it would be easy if you had, say, $70,000 in one of those accounts, that you could give 35 to someone over 5 years, and then it would take you 15 years with a new designated beneficiary before you could give that person the remaining 35,000. So the way I interpret it is, you probably want these funds, if you have a child, it would probably make sense for these funds to maximize at $35,000 when that individual is about 18 years old. That's my interpretation of it. But if those funds got higher, you could always slide it into a Roth while that individual is also going to college. So I think that it is a very logical place to put money. Now, I don't think it made a whole lot of sense before 2022, but I could be missing something too. But then that money's not gone forever. If you need to pull it out, it's a 10% penalty. But it was money that was taxed going in, and then it gets taxed coming out if you pull it out with your penalty. So the other piece I thought was really interesting was like there's a few waivers where you can pull the money out, and one is if your kid gets a full ride to a university, and then there was a couple others, like if they get disabled or death, I think was another one. Not things you want to think about, but there were a few waivers there. So the other note, I guess, that I would kind of like question about these funds, which is one that one of my good friends, Brian Thomason, always talks about with me with these funds, is it's like usually education is the cheapest money that you can find. So like even today with our crazy rates, when I was in school, they were all 0% loans. And now they're, 4.5%, but that's still about half of the going rate, right? So I guess my question is at what point, if you're thinking about, your child's future, at what point would you rather have them have $100,000 loan for school at 4.5%, or would you rather have them have $100,000 loan for a house at 8 or 9%? So it's just kind of food for thought, because education, I would assume, into the future will continue to be some of the cheapest money that our nation has to offer due to incentives. So I think I'm getting towards the end here and kind of want to wrap things up, but if anyone has any questions, go ahead and ask. But the kind of the take-home message is don't procrastinate. It doesn't matter, I don't think, really that much where you're putting your retirement money. Like, it's the difference of a few percent, right? But if the annual rate of return is 10%, who cares if you make a mistake and you put it in the wrong spot and it costs you 10%? Like, it just needs to be in there making money. Otherwise, the 10% would matter if it was in there, not invested, because you'd be losing money that rate. But anyway, and then like I didn't do when I was hired in in 2013 was make sure you question the advice you're given. Even if it's from an expert, go and do your own homework. And don't take action based on what you're told. Another mistake I made was I sold a bunch of stocks. I sold my house in North Dakota. I bought a bunch of stocks in the oil stocks crashed, and I got really mad and I sold them all. Also a huge mistake that I learned the hard way. So don't do things based on emotion. And then the last thing is like embrace your comfort level, but also question it, especially if you're earlier in career, because you can take some hard hits in terms of the stock market going down, but those risks are a lot less when coupled with time. So you can take some hard hits and go down in some higher risk stocks as long as you have enough time to recover from those. So that return on investment can be huge if you're early career. And again, Kimberly Becker is awesome. I'm not a retirement expert, but if anyone would like me to look over their shoulder, or if they want to get on a Zoom with me and screen share, I can walk you through all of the stuff that I do. Not that I'm an expert, but we don't have a whole lot of really good resources that I found within the UC, I feel like. And a lot of times when you talk to someone, they aren't allowed legally to give you real one-on-one advice. They can tell you where to go and what to look at, but they can't say oh, this is a good fund, or this is the pros and cons of a EFT versus a mutual fund and all those things. So I'm happy to nerd out and talk with anybody about it at any time. So that was all I had.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Well, if you want to stop sharing your screen, then we still have about 5 minutes for questions. And I see Kyle had a question in the chat. Could a 529 theoretically become an intergenerational school fund?
Yeah, I think so. That's my interpretation of it, Kyle. And it also can be used by anyone in the family. So you can give it to nieces and nephews, uncles. It seems like it's pretty transferable. What I don't understand is you have to have a declared beneficiary, like I was talking about. And that's what really kind of makes my head spin a little bit, is I don't understand with those declared beneficiaries how easy it is to say, Uncle Jim's gonna get $10,000 and my son Tommy's gonna get 16,000, and niece is gonna get whatever. So that's where I sent a question to Kim, but like I said, I haven't heard back. So I have some outstanding questions about the 529.
Other people have questions?
Oh yeah, Andy's got one there about grad school. So there's two different kinds of 529s, Andy, and I'd have to go revisit it because again I got lost. There's one that can be used for grad school and tuition, and then there's another one that can be used for anything. And they have different rules. And I was deep in the weeds on that last night and I'm not pulling up the details. But there's two of them, and you have to be, if you're interested in sending someone to grad school, it's a different one than the standard one. And I don't remember the terminology. I'd have to revisit it.
Hey, Jeff, do you have an opinion about the prepackaged investments that Fidelity manages based on our theoretical retirement ages?
Yeah, I have an opinion. I don't know if I don't know if I should be sharing it because I'm not a legal, tax or financial analyst, I guess. But my opinion is that they are very conservative. I have a small amount of money in them just so I can monitor how much better I'm doing than they're doing. I'll put it that way. They're pretty heavy into the bonds, which I think I personally will probably end up using kind of their most aggressive ones when I am nearing retirement. Because I think that they are good, safe investments. They just aren't performing as well as I would want them to be.
Right. And Jeff, you helped me and we shifted mine to a couple different categories, right? So you can actually break your, like, you don't have to stick with your retirement age. You can be more or less aggressive.
Yeah, so they have them in Fidelity based on like retirement age, like or year you want to retire. I think right now they go out to like 2065 or something like that, the last time I looked. So I have some funds in that 2065 bin, which is the farthest out, which would be the most aggressive option based on year you want to retire. And then, but they also have some mutual funds in there that are kind of canned mutual fund options. Like, so they have like some, there's like a foreign growth one, or there's foreign growth, there's domestic growth, there's domestic value, there's large cap value, small cap value. There's a lot of like bins that they have. And I think that some of those bins, I have some funds in the growth account, I think, that's binned there. And they perform like an average mutual fund. They're not particularly aggressive, but I will say that on bad days, when the stock market's really tanking hard, those are my highest performing accounts because they're, not as aggressive as a lot of the other stuff I have.
Great. Okay, well, we are at 12:45, so I think you all should have Jeff's contact info, and it sounds like he's open to folks reaching out to him to brainstorm or ask questions. Thank you so much for doing this, Jeff. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really still struggling with my imposter syndrome, but other than that, I am passionate about it. I'm not an expert, but I'm highly passionate, and I've been beaten on the walls of UC and Fidelity long enough to where I know a couple of people that are good experts and good contacts.